Welcome back, guys, to week 2 of the Big Sky Podcast Network Power Rankings presented by Tubbs of the Club, which means presented by Snake River Stampede Canadian Whiskey. I'm your host, Brian Marceau, but mercifully, dude, so a huge wrinkle. It's not just my solo hour anymore to the extent we can make that happen. So, hey, joined by Patty Frakes. Patty, that as viewers can see, live coming to us, obviously from Cheney. Patty, Sunday, we'll get to your Eagles, but how's it going in Cheney?
You know, it has been one of the most depressing football weekends I've ever had. Packers lost, Eastern lost. I helped coach some high school football this weekend for the first time, lost by 50. So, I've had a pretty rough weekend, but at least I got to watch football and mostly be lazy, so that's nice.
Okay, you guys know how the power rankings work. So we're going to go through teams 12 through 1 in the Big Sky Conference, as voted on by people like me, people like Patty, other Big Sky Podcast Network contributors, guys like McLean Westbrook from Jungle Land Podcast covering Idaho State, the guys from Grizz Fan Pod, guys from R&R Pod, Weber State Weekly guys like Colby Peterson and Chappie. I hope that show comes back someday, as well as Big Sky media members, guys like Coulter Nuanez, guys like Trevin Pixley, people who cover the conference vote. We go through teams 12 to 1. Now, we don't spend a ton of time talking about position jockeying because I don't give a shit about it. And we record at 10. If I don't give a shit about it, we're not talking about it. So we're going to start at 12. Oh, other thing too. If we learn nothing about the team, or if they're terrible and there's nothing to learn, we're just not going to talk about them very long. I don't know how else to do this and make it work. Oh, Mark Triple-Piece in the comments section. He's waiting for you, Patty. He says, say it, Patty.
I'm not 100% sure what I'm supposed to say, but I'm sure I'll say it. Go Bulldogs. I don't know.
Oh, my God. Okay, well, you know what? Mark, if we had someone better running as the producer, we would definitely – oh, wait. We do. JV team is here.
Go Vandals.
There we go. Number 12. And by the way, higher tech this week because I had 2 minutes to prep. So, hey, number 12, Cal Poly Mustangs. Cal Poly did exactly what they were supposed to do this week and lost at Stanford 41-7. Yeah, Cal Poly scored 7 points. This comes after losing to non-scholarship San Diego last week. By the way, we have the dueling storylines of the Big Sky picking up wins against the Mountain West and picking up non-scholarship losses we can talk about. But we're not going to talk about Cal Poly. Moving on. They're number 12 because they should be. Number 11, Northern Colorado. Your Northern Colorado Bears. Okay, this is not a Big Sky Mountain West story that we're going to spend much time on. Northern Colorado loses at Colorado State 38-17. Nothing's really changed for Northern Colorado. Yes, they scored 17 against Colorado State. That's better than 7s last week against Incarnate Word. But look, 24 points in 2 games. Northern Colorado looking exactly like the Bears did last season. If you don't eclipse around 300 yards, you have to have an elite defensive team for these games to matter. We still know, I don't think we learned anything about Northern Colorado, Patty. They can't score. So hey, no change. Number 10, top 5 Portland State. Top 5 Portland State was part of the first Big Sky game of the year. We'll talk more about that when we get to Weber State, but Portland State loses 43-16. It's going to be a very long season for Portland, but we learned nothing about Portland State. They look like they're terrible, plus they have a rough schedule, so they're getting their ass kicked like they will most weeks. Now, Patty, we're going to pull you off the shelf in a second because we have our first team we learned something about coming in at number 9, Eastern Washington. And Patty, you intimated the direction we're going to go. The Eagles, last week, we were talking about how Eastern could legitimately be 4-0 heading into conference play because Drake is the type of team that a Big Sky school that's a purchased win from the Big Sky end. Pioneer Conference non-scholarship. Well, Drake goes to Cheney and pulls out an overtime win, 35-32. Hit a couple things before, Patty. I'm interested in your takeaways about like what we saw and what we learned about Eastern Washington this game. Kekoa Vesperas, 21, 26, 177 yards, no touchdowns. Eagles rushed it 17 times, more than they passed it. Picked up 3 rushing touchdowns, including Michael Wortham, kind of gadget player. It is technically the backup quarterback, but he rushed it more than he passed it. 11 rushes for 41 yards and 2 touchdowns. Two of 4 in the passing game for 2 yards and a touchdown. And Tuna Altahir adds 12 carries for 94 yards and a touchdown. But look, the story of this game, Patty, I want to hear from you because you were there. How in God's name did Eastern lose to Drake, and what did that tell us about this Eastern Eagle team?
Yeah, I was still trying to figure that out this morning when I woke up because we're just the whole game. I was just sitting here like, what is happening right now? Like, why are we playing so evenly with this non-scholarship team? Well, Kekoa, I mean, he was efficient in his completion numbers, but he just anything further than about 10 yards down the field just didn't seem like he was clicking. Wasn't really able to make those throws. I mean, the offensive line was blowing dudes off the ball, and Eastern was able to run the ball pretty consistently, but we just kept going away from it. We kept getting into behind the chains, and then you can't run the ball because, you know, if you run 5 yards of play, you can't pick up a first down on, 1st and 20. So tons of that. One of the crazy stats that I pulled up, Eastern was just absolutely killed by penalties in this game. There was 176 yards of negative yardage for Eastern through penalties, and that's negating a 42-yard Chisholm punt return, a 15-yard punt return, 67-yard Chisholm pass that went down to like the 5-yard line, as well as there was like 4 15-yard like dumb roughing the passer, late hit it out of bounds. I think there was a horse collar. Just gave Drake a ton of momentum and just kind of made it just not fun. Defense also, secondary was not good, which it's hard to like be very analytical when it's so emotionally like what the hell is happening. But yeah, it was brutal.
Well, you're describing here, like I talked about Northern Colorado 2 seconds ago, like, 298 yards on the game. You just described Eastern essentially throwing away 3 quarters worth of Northern Colorado production. So, like, hey, the question, what happened? Eastern played sloppy, is what you're saying. Eastern gave this game away. Hot take, generally, the teams we talk about as being good or great don't give games away, especially gimme games where picking up OOC wins is such a big deal for Big Sky schools if you have playoff aspirations. And this was a imminently winnable game for Eastern. So, yeah, like I don't have any pushback other than to say, from hearing your observations, it's a little surprising to hear that the secondary was the part of Eastern's defense that looked more susceptible, but I'm just going to throw the asterisk. Pioneer Conference teams shouldn't really be able to push around Big Sky teams, at the line. So that, I guess, isn't shocking to hear you say that, when you factor in this is a team Eastern should have beat. If Eastern plays this team 10 times, they probably win the next 9. But look, if Eastern is not good enough. Look, I don't think anyone in the Big Sky is good enough to throw away wins. Eastern, we'll see how they recover from this. So, hey, after Eastern, we do have another team that we're going to kind of blow by. Number 8, Idaho State. Let's talk about the Bengals for 4 seconds. They played Western Oregon, D2. Idaho State wins 50-10. The takeaway here is, hey, Kobe Tracy, who came in relief of Jordan Cook last week. Kobe Tracy is clearly the starting quarterback at Idaho State. 28 completions on 42 attempts, 343 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Somehow managed to throw 2 picks against Western Oregon, but I will say that's kind of in line with what Tracy did last year at Utah Tech, 19 touchdowns, 12 picks. But we learned nothing really about Idaho State other than that Kobe Tracy is, for a fact, the guy to pay attention to. And you can see Idaho State's this is 2 games in a row now. Idaho State is trying to run the ball a little bit more. 28 rush attempts this game for 126 yards. Hey, grain of salt, it's a D2 team, but that is an evolution in Idaho State football for 2 consecutive weeks now of do they run the ball a little bit compared to last season? Not at all. But Patty, you want to talk about Idaho State D2? You ready to move on to number 7?
I'm ready to move on. I didn't watch this.
Okay. Number 7, NAU. Game 2 of new head coach Brian Wright's time in Flagstaff. This is another one, not a gigantic amount to talk about because NAU losing to number 20 Arizona is exactly what's supposed to happen. So we learned nothing about NAU in week 1. We learn a teeny bit about NAU in week 2, and that at least was a kind of competitive game. It's NAU leads at halftime 10-6, but then they're shut out in the second half. So not relative to a Power 4 game, not at all an awful showing, right in line with pretty standard, being plucky for a half. But then the overall talent wins out. Ty Pennington, quarterback for NAU, goes 14-24, passes for 84 yards and 0 touchdowns. But I guess my big takeaway from this game, Patty, is NAU has the type of schedule that I hate, that the college football season is actually a very short season. And NAU is one of those teams. We're 2 weeks in. We know absolutely nothing about NAU after 2 weeks. And legitimately, NAU next week plays Utah Tech. We may have something to talk about after that game, but I don't think there's anything else here. Number 6, Patty, your favorite, Sacramento State. The Hornets. Oh man, I want to give you some time to talk about Sacramento State because some of your concerns, I think, are coming to fruition. Like Sacramento State loses at Fresno State. Sac State's supposed to lose that game, 46-30. This is a Mountain West team, one of the rare Mountain West teams doing what they're supposed to against a Big Sky school. But Patty, your concern on why you were low on Sacramento State, depending on how you want, there's different language to use for this. But broadly speaking, your take was, I don't think Sacramento State knows who they are offensively, and you don't think they're good enough defensively for them to not know what in God's name they're doing. So I want to give you the floor because you have been you've had shade on Sacramento State since, honestly, you're a sophomore. So it feels like since the first day you learned where Sacramento was, there's been shade from your direction that, headed south that way. So I want to just give this to you, man. Sacramento State, what's your takeaway from their 46-30 loss at Fresno State?
Yeah, man. There was some bright spots offensively. Tao Tolliver has been pretty solid on the ground. The Hornet offensive line has looked good in spurts, especially in the run game. But, Caden Bennett has become one of their greatest weapons and, their biggest liability at the same time. And, he will make a ridiculous escape a sack, throw for 40-yard gain, and then throw the worst pick you've ever seen in your life the next play. And it's just it feels like Coach Thompson's trying to leave him in just enough to get a big play and then take him out before he can fumble. Because he had 2 turnovers in this game, Caden Bennett did. He had a fumble, and he had a pick. The turnovers are going to be what kills Sac State this year if they don't clean them up. I think their fronts are good. Their offensive line and their front 7 is good, but the quarterback position has been just a wild ride for them offensively, and don't know what is going to happen with that. Then on the other end, on the defensive side of things, their secondary just got tore up by Fresno State. Tons and tons of just busted coverages in that game. I believe Fresno State had a receiver that had 250 yards receiving.
Yeah, Magdalena, 7 catches, 235 yards, and a touchdown.
Yeah, it was defensively they did not look amazing, but I mean in the box they looked okay. I think they're gonna be a kind of a middle of the pack Big Sky team unless they can really figure out that offensive identity. And I don't know, man. Conklin looked pretty good.
Yes, that's the thing I want to bring up. Caden Bennett has 5 turnovers in 2 games. Yeah, that's the experience, dude. Honestly, Sacramento State, if you subtract 5 turnovers in 2 games, They could be a 2-0 Mountain West team.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that's likely, but 5 turnovers in 2 games that were they're relatively close. I mean, this had a slightly different rhythm. Sac State's down 25-10 at halftime, and like they scored a couple touchdowns in the fourth quarter to make the score look a little more respectable. But like as you referenced, hey, get rid of a couple of those turnovers. This could be a different game. Carson Conklin, 20-37 passing, 219 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So I guess from what you saw, like what you described as Caden Bennett has kind of become like a more intense version of himself from last year. Hey, he's great on the ground, but like, he's gonna throw it God knows where a handful of times. And right now he's looking much worse through 2 games with turn the ball over than he did last season. Do you like Sacramento State with Conklin in a little bit more than with Bennett?
It's hard to say because, I mean, when there's spurts of this game where Conklin comes in and they just can't get anything going because, the Fresno front 7 was able to just really key in on Tao Tolliver, and there's just no threat of Conklin pulling it like there is for Caden Bennett. So they were having success running the ball up the middle when Caden Bennett was in there. And then they weren't when Conklin was in there. But when Caden Bennett's in there, they just were not a threat through the air, really. Unless Caden Bennett did something wild with his legs, they just really weren't much of a threat through the air. So I don't know. I hate saying I think they just need to pick one and stick with it. I think that's what they got to do.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Caden Bennett, like you said, 5 of 13, 135 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. But that's accuracy that's going God knows where. And 5 lost turnovers in 2 games. I mean, it's hard to do worse than that.
I think in the Big Sky, Conklin might be the guy.
Yeah.
I think they have the O-line to be able to run the ball without
it. It feels like Andy Thompson has wanted Conklin to be the guy too. Like I haven't listened to a press conference, but it just feels that way. But hey, we've given Sac State a lot of attention. We're going to go move on to number 5 and talk about Weber State for a minute. So Weber State, they beat top 5 Portland State 43-16. And this was most certainly a rebound game for Weber State after, getting decimated by University of Washington in week 1, like they were supposed to be fair. Damon Bankson, running back, 15 carries, 133 yards, and 2 touchdowns for Weber. Richie Munoz, quarterback, 19-30 for 219 yards and a touchdown. So that is at least a recovery from compared to what we saw in the University of Washington total on the Weber State side. Team defense, look, Weber State, we know defensively they're strong. They held Portland State to 240 yards. While accruing 535. This was just an ass kicking, and Portland State only had 1 turnover in this game. So takeaways here for Weber State.
Yeah, I thought Weber looked okay. I mean, they looked pretty good. It felt like a closer game than it probably should have been through 2.5 quarters there.
Yeah, it was 19-10 at the end of the third quarter, and then Weber State went on a 24-6 run to close fourth quarter.
Yeah, and a lot of that was I think Richie Munoz got into a little bit of a rhythm, and they were able to run the ball a little bit. But I mean, generally Portland State stopped the run pretty well, which surprised me. But I don't know, Richie, he seems very streaky. And I think Weber State kind of goes as Richie goes in terms of when Richie is making plays and not throwing picks, he's pretty good. And I think they have the defense to be a really good Big Sky team. But when Richie's off, man, he's just really off. And so I think if Richie can really get into a groove, Weber State's definitely a dangerous team. But it really just depends on how Richie's playing.
Yeah, so you are describing Weber State as, hey, if Sacramento State had a way better defense and just picked 1 quarterback, they'd be Weber State.
Yeah,
that's okay. So hey, we're in the top 4 now, so we got to hear a little bit from his show sponsor, Snake River Stampede Canadian Whiskey. Look, there's 2 options for Snake River, and it doesn't matter which one you pick. You want to get the Snake River Stampede That's a double barrel finish, starts with ex bourbon barrels, finishes in Oloroso sherry casks. You want to celebrate a big win like Patty did not get to do this weekend in Cheney. You can class it up by the Snake River Stampede 1915 small batch edition. That has a double barrel finish of ex bourbon, then ex Canadian rye whiskey casks. Either way, you can't go wrong. Snake River has, to me, the best Canadian whiskey you're going to get in Idaho State liquor stores. Grab yourself a bottle today. Now, UC Davis comes in at number 4 in our polling. And UC Davis, okay, Texas A&M Commerce, that's a Southland Conference team, correct, Patty?
Yes.
Okay, Texas A&M Commerce is a not very good Southland Conference team. Texas A&M Commerce is a team that a good Big Sky school should walk away with a win. And I mean, Davis kind of did. It was 9-0 at halftime. 3 Hunter Ridley field goals for the Aggies, but third quarter Davis scores 13. They take a 13. They score 13 points, hold Texas A&M Commerce to 7 points. Miles Hastings on the game, 26 completions on 39 attempts, 320 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 pick. Preseason offensive MVP Len Larson, 28 carries for 123 yards, also had 3 catches for 50 yards. CJ Hutton leads Davis in the receiving room for the second straight week, 6 catches, 84 yards. So, hey, what did we learn from Davis? I'll throw it to you in a second, but what I see here is exactly what it feels like Davis has kind of been the last couple of years. Look, you see points of potential strength for sure. This is a win. And hey, we just talked about Eastern not picking up a win. It's not like that's irrelevant. But, hey, took a minute it took him a half to really separate from Texas A&M Commerce. And Texas A&M Commerce would probably finish, they'd be competing with Cal Poly and Northern Colorado for last place in the Big Sky. So I guess I see, look, it's game 2 of Tim Plow as head coach. Sometimes it can take a minute for teams to figure out what they're doing, especially with the coaching change. I feel that Davis is right now who I thought they were going to be, which is steady on both sides of the ball, but not overwhelming in any facet.
Yeah, I think Davis, the one thing that's keeping them from really excelling and being a top 3 Big Sky team, in my opinion, is the offensive line play hasn't been great. And in this game, Lance Larson had 130 yards or something like that on the ground, but it was watching this back. It gave me shades of Anthony Woods last year, where he was making a lot out of nothing constantly in this game. He had a few very nice blocked creases and stuff, but that Texas A&M Commerce front, I don't know if they're just vastly improved or what, but Davis's O-line had a tough time getting pushed. And that's part of why it was a 9-0 game at halftime. Is Davis was, when they have the whole field to work with, Hastings can throw the ball up and there's spacing for him to get the ball to receivers in space. That's kind of what their whole offense is Hastings throwing a little dink and dunk, getting his guys space, make someone miss, and they get a 10-yard gain. Well, when you're in the red zone within 10 yards or so, you don't have the space to do that. And you got to kind of rely on your offensive line to go just power rush the ball. And they just didn't have the O-line play to do that most of the night, which was, a little bit surprising because I just remember Davis usually having a decent O-line. So that's something that I really want to keep my eye on as the season goes, is just how does their front look in terms of giving Larison holes rather than just Larison's rushing numbers.
Yeah, Ron Lowney in the comment section, as soon as Larison gets hurt, UC Davis is done. If you want to win a national title, you have to have a QB. Hint. Goddamn. Ron, loved having a comment section, dude. The Big Sky is a hot mess, except for Bobcats. We'll get to your Bobcats in a second, Ron. So we're in the top 3. Before we get to our number 3 team, Hughes River Expedition, show sponsor. They've been Vandal owned and operated since 1976 and ready to take you on a vacation of a lifetime. So what does Hughes River do? All-inclusive river trips. Doesn't matter if you're a big corporation or just a family. You want to have the kind of trip that you guys are going to talk about for the rest of your lives. Things like seeing the Middle Fork of the Salmon. Things like seeing the Selway. Things like just being able to camp outside on pristine beaches, run amazing whitewater, hiking scenic trails, spotting wildlife, and beautiful natural hot springs. Look, if that sounds appealing to you, which it does to me right now, get a hold of Colin. Grab a paddle, catch dinner, ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call him now at 406-540-4450 or check him out at hughesriver.com. Number 3. Ron's not. So Ron Lowney, one of our active live viewers right now. I hope you got your popcorn round, Ron. Montana. Montana. Speaking of teams that are like that should be a little pissed with how things go. So like Montana travels to North Dakota. North Dakota, Missouri Valley Football Conference. North Dakota is not. They appear to not be a bad football team. They had made the playoffs last season, so we know that. Montana takes a 24-7 lead into halftime and proceeds to not gain a first down until their final drive of the fourth quarter. Just impressive come apart for Montana on the road. Kealili Ayat started at quarterback, went 21 of 29 for 145 yards and a touchdown. So like not like an atrocious stat line, but again, like the Grizz got up 24-7 and then just did nothing offensively for an entire half. And North Dakota is too good for that to be what you do. Running back Eli Gilman, only 8 carries for 86 yards, did pick up a touchdown. But we still have not seen Junior Bergen suit up for the Grizz this season. So, Patty, I mean, it has to bring a smile to your heart. If Eastern's going to lose to Drake, the Grizz might as well pick up a loss to at least help you on that end. So, like, hey, what are your takeaways from Montana going down on the road at North Dakota after leading 24-7 at halftime?
Yeah, this was it wasn't as bad as Eastern and Pocatello last year, but it was a pretty rough collapse. And I think a big part of it was Montana just could not move the ball in that second half. And I think the leading factor of that was, the Montana offensive line got smoked. Ayat was just constantly under duress. And, you look at his stat line, a lot of people are like, oh, we need a better quarterback. Ayat played horrible. Dude, he was running for his life that entire second half, and he honestly bailed Montana out of a good 5 to 6 sacks in that game. I think he actually saved Montana a good 60 yards and just avoiding sacks. So like, I don't know. I think Ayat is the guy. I think he's the better quarterback of the two guys, because when Fife came in, he didn't look good. But that's the offensive story. Defensive story, Montana, it's just the monster of the 3-3-5. They're gonna give up creases. They're gonna give up big plays. They got burnt. They got burnt doing their twists and stunts and stuff multiple times, just running the football by North Dakota. So I don't think that secondary and linebacker core is quite to the level of last year's team when it comes to just running up and tackling. And that's where they've been getting burnt, is like giant lanes are opening up when Montana is stunting like wild like they do, and it's leading to big plays. And that's how North Dakota was able to score 27 or 20 points in a half.
Yeah, 20 points in the second half.
Yeah. So I don't know. They definitely look a tick slower on defense, in my opinion.
Yeah, so this was a little bit of surprise because in week 1, Fife looked a little steadier than Ayat, but Fife came in 1-0-2, and that was it. So, when maybe Hauk is famous for like never actually like saying anything worthwhile in things like two deeps or in interviews. Maybe he was being honest when he said last week the actual plan was to put Fife in when they did, which just happened to take place after Ayat had a fumble, and Montana beat Missouri State last week, so that was part of why it looked like Fife just took the job. But team's high on Ayat, the fan base is high on Ayat for a reason. Patty, you described some potential reason to be high on him, but Montana under Bobby Hauk is not like the most aggressive. They're never going to be like the most aggressive team offensively, and I think not having Junior Bergen is a huge deal, but I also think this is more the thing to keep in mind with Montana. That this is a well-coached team. Like they're going to be strong or at least steady this season, but they do have the ability, like Ron Lowney says in the comment section, this is classic Bobby Hauk outsmarting himself. Offensively, they absolutely do have they have a floor that when things aren't going well in Montana, they can hit. It's a pretty low floor. We got to go to number 2, Ron, the team you were waiting for. And yeah, hey, Montana State, number 2 in our poll. The Bobcats, look, man, they're just rolling 3-0 now. That's with a 41-24 win over Maine. Maine's going to be FBS in a year, right, Patty?
I do not remember this news. No.
Okay,
I think you're thinking of Delaware.
I take it back. Yeah, I'm thinking Delaware. Anyway, Tommy Mellott, 12 of 15 passing for 144 yards and a touchdown. Thing that I want to pay attention to here, Mellott only rushed it 5 total times, which means, hey, one of the concerns for Montana State is, hey, they keep Mellott healthy? He's rushed it 20 times through 3 games, and he has, I believe, 2 rushing touchdowns or 3 rushing touchdowns through the 3 games. So he's hit the ground on rushes, counting sacks, 17 times. So they're keeping an eye out upright. Sorry, they're keeping Mellott, my bad, up. The Bobcats are able to keep him upright, which is to say, hey, on the ground, Montana State of 3rd game with around 350 rushing yards, 36 rushes on the game for 344 yards and 4 touchdowns, led by Scott Trey Humphrey with 110 yards on 4 carries and 2 touchdowns. But Jared White also 15 carries for 99 yards. Adam Jones, who led the Bobcats in week 1, 4 carries for 63 yards and 2 touchdowns. What I learned about this team is, man, Montana State, this is they're steady. I honestly think Montana State has the most boxes checked of any Big Sky team after week 2, week 3 for them. We know who they are and we know what they're good at with Montana State. I mean, they feel like a more cohesive version of last year, which, hey, maybe going down to just Mellott is what the team needed, because Mallott's passing serviceably. If he can pass serviceably, I'm talking about the better games on their schedule, Patty. All he has to do is be able to pass serviceably, and that O-line opens pretty damn big holes. That the running talent in Montana State is pretty damn impressive. I mean, if I'm a Bobcat, I'm pretty happy.
Pretty much. Yep. That's all I had.
Okay. So, Ron, thanks for joining the show. But now that means number 1. I got to say, I saw this. We don't care about poll jockeying, right, Patty? So, who gives a shit? But Idaho's number 1. Now, hey, why would Idaho be number 1? Well, Idaho picked up a big Mountain West win. This was a big deal. Idaho travels to Laramie and beats Wyoming at War Memorial Stadium 17-13. This was a really fun game, considering it's a 7-13 game with 3 points scored in the second half. But hey, spoiler alert too. Idaho backup quarterback Jack Wagner goes out in the 4th quarter, does not return. So Idaho might be down to their 3rd string quarterback. We're going to see what this means. We know Jack Lane's out for at least 6 weeks with a broken collarbone after week 1 against Oregon. But Patty, I thought Idaho defensively looked fantastic.
Yeah, I did too. Defensively, they look great. Up front, man, Keyshawn James Newby, Zach McKinnell said this the other day or earlier today in a live stream, just comment. He was like, Keyshawn James Newby right now, I think he's the front runner for the Buck Buchanan. His stat line through 2 FBS games is something like 5.5 sacks and like 7 TFLs.
And I think he got robbed of a sack too. I don't think he was offsides on the one he got a sack, and then Svoboda also fumbled it. It was called back on offsides. I don't think he was offsides. I think he just timed it perfectly.
Yeah, and he was in the backfield all night. I mean, that dude has looked very, very impressive. Jackson Eck was very steady as usual with his, he's going to average freaking 10 tackles a game at this rate. On the secondary side of things, Idaho was one busted coverage away from making me a correct predictor. I predicted a 17-6 Idaho win. They ended up winning 17-10. The 10 came on 17-13. What was it?
Yeah, 17-13.
Yes,
You're
13.
right. The one Wyoming touchdown came on blown coverage.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think whoever the corner was, it was zero. I can't remember his name right now. He thought it was man or something when it was cover 4, and he should have not let the guy beat him deep. Anyways, other than that, man, they look pretty dang good. I mean, they gave up a few yards to. I mean, Svoboda had a few like bigger runs off of just read option plays, pulling it and going, which I don't know if Idaho fully expected him to like pull the ball and run because he didn't really do it a ton at the Arizona State game. So I don't know. I think, man, that Idaho defense is really good, and they're kind of the staple of bend but don't break, in my opinion. They look really good. Offensively, I think is the more interesting. Well, not more interesting, but the bigger question mark for sure. You can hit on the Jack Wagner news, but they're inconsistent at best, is what I would say offensively.
Yeah, I mean that's the other takeaway for Idaho is I'm going to co-sign everything you said defensively. Idaho looks like an old Weber State team right now. They're good defensively up front, and secondary looks pretty damn solid. We don't know. No one knows what Idaho is going to be giving you offensively. The issue with quarterback, but as big Idaho fans are going to know, the main concern offensively was going to be offensive line development. And hey, through two games, two FBS games, you'd call it kind of mixed results. Idaho hasn't had this army of sustained drives, but they have been able, they've done enough to be competitive at Oregon and then to pick up a win. So there's only so much complaining you can do, especially with Jack and the other, the Jack Wagner issue. Backup quarterback, he comes in, completes his first 8 passes, then goes 4-13 the rest of the way. That to me is Wyoming crowding the box saying, Jack, redshirt freshman with no experience, only played 1 year of quarterback in high school, go beat us. And he couldn't. But defensively, Idaho, they had the cushion they needed. And if you're a super Idaho fan, Jason X famous for calling things like trick plays, going for it on 4th down. I think he's going to figure out that there needs to be a little bit different calculus. The 2 Idaho touchdowns did come on 4th down conversions, which were deep. These are 2-yard plays that Idaho had to convert on, and they got them. But, like the fake punt at your own 42-yard line, shit, like stuff like that. I think Idaho's just going to bail on that because I don't think this coaching staff is going to be stubborn in the way that, hey, let's talk about Montana to make this a Ron Lowney, celebration show. When he's joking about Bobby Hauck outsmarting himself, the other way of saying that is, hey, there's times where Bobby Hauck is needlessly stubborn, and that hurts Montana sometimes. I don't see Eck as being needlessly stubborn. I think he's going to adapt because that's the language he has always used since coming to Idaho. But there's going to be a lot of adaptation on that offense because Idaho's just weak offensively right now. And then the big issue is if there's every team Idaho plays from now on is going to say, Idaho, you need to beat us enough through the air for us to give you any sort of space on the ground. Now there's some big sky games where that's not going to matter. Who gives a shit about Cal Poly? But Idaho's aspirations are advancing in the playoffs. And for Idaho to do that, I think they're going to have to be able to turn over. They're going to have to find something offensively, but this defense is good enough that's going to win a lot of games for the Vandals, and it's going to keep them competitive against pretty much everyone. So, Patty, with that said, man, we're in at 39 minutes. Not too bad. Join the patreon.com/Tubs at the club. Hashtag only Tub Discord, especially if you're a Vandal fan. But hey, we talk about in that Discord, it's active. Game Day talks about a ton of games. Help us out. If you like what we're doing here, that's a way to help support the show. So we'll be back with the power rankings next week. It's probably always going to be late, and mercifully, Patty can help me out with this. It's full disclosure, guys. It's more fun, and also recording solo. There's a lot of things you can screw up that if there's another person there, it doesn't matter, but you're solo, you got to get that filibuster down. Steve Kurtz, the comments section, V's up. Thanks, Jen. Steve, glad to have you here. Yeah, we're going to call tonight. Hey, Tubbs Club's back on Wednesday for the Idaho preview. We'll record as quickly after the Idaho game next week as we can. The math will be a little bit odd because a lot of us are actually going to be at the Albany game, and then this show is just going to be on Sundays late. So, hey, thanks everyone for joining. Patty, thanks for bringing the expertise. Good to have you as a co-host. Sorry about how things are going at Eastern for a week, but whatever. Things change. All right, guys, we're going to call that a night. And until next week, I'm going to find a video to close it out, and we'll see you guys next Sunday.